Good morning, everyone. Sorry for that technical difficulty that we had. I do apologize. Welcome to the webinar. We are excited to hear about closing the year in NAV. Des Gagir from Innovia Consulting will be presenting today. She is our senior application consultant. She has been with Innovia for a year, so she celebrates her 1-year anniversary. So congratulations, Des. And she's been with NAV since 2002. And just a couple of quick pieces of housekeeping. First, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the question box, and we will get them called out and answered for you. Second, we do record this in all of our webinars, so if you want to view the recording or have someone else in your organization see it, you can find it later this afternoon at innovia.com. So now, without further ado, Des, you have control.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Angie. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Desiree Jagir, and just to reiterate what our objective is today, closing your year in NAV is a process that we run obviously only once a year. So it's a good topic to get a refresher on what tasks we need to cover and best practices and kind of a little checklist of things to cover before we even initiate that close year. So it's a good time of year to do a little refresher. So I want to give you the 3 steps that it takes to close the year in NAV, and I also want to cover a couple of best practices and other little details that are good to know, or details to make sure that you consider as you go towards closing your year in NAV. So I'm going to give a brief introduction on my experience, and then we're going to cover some of those tasks to consider prior to closing your income statement. Then there are only 3 steps to close the year in NAV. We're going to cover all 3 of those. I'm going to explain in greater detail the close income statement batch. Then we're going to go into NAV and we're going to do a demonstration of it. And then I thought it might be interesting to cover some of the typical year-end support submissions that we've seen over the past couple of years. Maybe head a couple of those off at the past, help you save some money in the long run. And then at the end, we'll have some Q&A. So my name is Desiree Jagir. I am the service and support team lead. Really all that means is I'm a switchboard operator. I try to make sure that that all the new tickets that come through the service and support team gets load balanced, escalated where necessary, and all of that fun stuff. I've been in the Dynamics community for 17 years, NAV for 15, AX for 2, played lots of different roles from developer, project manager, account manager, and right now service and support team lead. There is my contact information. There won't be another slide with this on there. Feel free to reach out to me for any additional information you might want. I'm happy to give you the slideshow. I also have generated a couple of checklists that summarizes the information that I'm going to be going over. So feel free to email me and ask for that, and I'll send it out to you. So let's jump right in. Here's a nice list. Over the past 2-3 weeks, I've done nothing but add to this list. Tasks to consider before implementing the close income statement process in NAV. I won't be covering any of these in great detail. I'm happy to take that conversation offline though. But you always want to have a real good, usable, recent backup of your system. Most of us already have that on a standard process, nightly batch job, if you will, but something to consider as you initiate the process. If you're running jobs, you're going to want to run your periodic activities, WIP recognition, post the WIP to GL, true up any of your job-related transactions. Another one that gets skipped every so often is the vendor 1099. You're going to want to run your vendor 1099 information reports. Make sure that the amounts look right. If they don't, make any correcting entries, all of that. If you are dealing in foreign currency, you're going to want to run your adjust exchange rate batch job to true up any entries that were posted or received but then invoiced at a different exchange rate to true up those values. You're going to want to, let's see, do your physical inventory. Most people already do that. Usually I don't even have to add a bullet point to it, but I did anyway. So run your physical inventory or make any necessary physical inventory adjustments. And then after that, we're going to close your inventory periods. By closing the inventory period, that's going to make sure that your adjust cost item entry postings won't impact any of those closed dates once we close the income statement. And if you do run the adjust cost item entries, you're going to want to run that as well, so you can make any of those necessary postings. But if you don't run the adjust cost item entries, then don't wait till the end of the year to do it. Contact us and we'll help find a good time to do that. Payroll year-end processes, I actually have an entirely separate checklist for year-end payroll processes. So there again, if you would like that checklist, reach out to me and I'm happy to send that to you. Run, print, save all of your financial statements. Review your financial statements with your accountant. Make any necessary adjustments. If you have other companies within the NAV database or other data sources, run your consolidation imports. Get all that data loaded into your consolidation company. And don't forget to create your new accounting periods. So, all right, let's jump into the 3 steps to close your year in NAV. The first one is to close your accounting period. Pretty easy, just a click of a button. We're going to see that in a minute. Run your close fiscal year batch job. That one's a little more in depth. And then post your general journal. Of the 3 steps, that third one may be done automatically by NAV, depending on certain conditions that exist in your setup. But some takeaways on the 3 steps is this process, it's going to calculate and transfer the income statement GL account balances to your balance sheet accounts, or typically retained earnings GL accounts. It can be, NAV also, you know, at the first bullet point, close your accounting period, that puts a bunch of check boxes in your accounting period, identifies that it's closed. One thing to keep in mind though, even though those dates are reflected as being closed, NAV does allow posting to closed dates. And NAV also allows running this entire process at any given time. So if you get an adjustment back from an accountant and you have to go back into a closed year, you are allowed to make another posting to a closed year and then rerun this entire process. And NAV will only pick up that difference or that last posting that you just posted. So step 1, you're going to close your accounting period. I'm giving you the path here, accounting periods. Click the button at the top, close year. There's a button at the top that says close year. Part of the steps to consider prior to closing is the button just to the left of the red circled one. That's create your year. You can create as many years ahead of time as you want or need to. And once you click this close year, you're going to be asked, what NAV is going to do is just allow you to close year over year. So the very next open set of dates, it's going to suggest to close. It will not allow you to jump over a year. So you have to take it year over year. And then this is what it's going to do. The result of this task closes the date range and it identifies the date as being locked. What that means is that starting date can't be edited. So up until I hit close year, I was able to edit my starting date of each of my accounting periods. So a couple of details here to remember. You can't close a year until the next fiscal year is created. Once a fiscal year is closed, you can't change that start date. And even if a fiscal year is closed, you can still post to it. But NAV in the general ledger entry table is going to identify anything posted after the year is closed with a flag that says, I forget the name of it, but it's, you know, after the year has been posted. Basically, it's a checkbox. Okay, so step 2, run your closed fiscal year batch job. It's right there near the create your fiscal year. And then here are some of the options that you're going to give NAV. So what year are you closing with? What's the general ledger template and batch that you want to load with those closing entries? What's your document number? I always recommend that whatever journal and batch you're going into, you should have your automatic document numbers identified, so you don't have to worry about generating a document number. Or you can come up with your own, and then it just, you know, the same thing with your posting description. Make it meaningful to you. NAV automatically fills that in with close income statement. So the close by, that is going to be based on your business requirements. Are you using business units? Do you want to see your income statement balances by business unit and or dimension values? I will say that if you're using dimensions to post to your income statement accounts, then you're going to want to close the income statement by dimension as well. It just makes your reports come out a little bit more meaningful. So this is the process where it can be run as often as necessary and whenever you need to rerun it. So if you ran it, you know, at the end of January for December 31st, an adjustment was made, somebody accidentally posted something, you can go back and rerun this, and this is the process that's going to pick up any additional postings to the ledger entry that was posted after the closed income statement process was run and posted. Also, I would recommend that only one person in the organization has the responsibility of running this process. I have seen where someone runs it today, looks at the entries, somebody tomorrow comes in and reruns it, and NAV will recalculate and load another batch or append the entries to an existing batch, and the end result is a double post, a double closing fiscal year entry post. So that's why I usually recommend, you know, this is usually one person within the organization. All right, there's some details. I've kind of already gone through this, but the closed income statement batch, it calculates your balances, transfers them from your income statement to your balance sheet GL accounts, usually your retained earnings account. If you do this by dimension, if you post by dimension, then usually you're going to close by dimension. It calculates and loads your general journal, but it won't post it. So it gives you that opportunity to take a look at it. So one thing to point out about the whole loads the general ledger or loads the journal but doesn't post it. If you are an organization that is using in your general ledger setup an additional reporting currency, then NAV will auto post the results of the income statement batch processing. Okay, and another thing to notice is the closing dates. So what this batch job does is it tallies everything up and calculates your income statement closing balances, moves it to your retained earnings. Pardon me. And the date that it uses is called in NAV, it's a closing date, or it's a C date. It's a date that looks like, for example, 12/31/17 with a C in front of it. That date falls after the last day of your closing period and the first day of the next period or the next year. So if between that line between 12/31 and 1/1, if we could create another day, that would be this closing date. That would be the C/12/31/17 date. So I say this, and it's important to know that because a lot of times we get, I'm getting an error, my posting date range, outside of my posting date range. And that would be because most of the time people identify 12/31 as the ending date of their posting date range, and you will get an error because this date actually, the closing date actually falls outside of that date. And then NAV, of course, allows us to filter in or out those closing dates. Again, you can run this process as many times as you need to, and you can run it at any time. So if you don't have your additional reporting currency turned on in the general ledger setup, then you will, the third step would be for you to go to your general journal, review your entries, and then post. So let's take a look at this inside of NAV. And I have my NAV 2017 loaded here. And I am going to go to Departments, Financial Management, under Periodic Activities. I have a fiscal year where basically everything that I need is sitting right here. I've got my accounting periods. This is where I'm going to generate new ones, close the old one, and initiate that batch job. Before I do this, though, I am just going to go to my general ledger, Gen Journal, and I'm going to make sure that it's empty. And it is. And I've created a year-end batch. And what I was talking about earlier is I like to have the number series identified at least for my year-end close batch, so I don't have to worry about coming up with an appropriate document number for the transaction. So I know it's blank. I'm going to go back to Periodic Activities, go to my fiscal year, go to my accounting period, because I know that the first step, I'm going to close the year of 2018. Because if you notice in my demo database, today is January 25th of 2019. So the first thing that I do is close the year. Now, obviously, I've got 19 created here as well as 2020. But if I wanted to, I could create another year. And NAV would ask, hey, you know, what are the number of periods? How long are the period lengths? And then I could say, okay, and I'd create another year. But I'm going to close the year. And remember, it's not going to let me close a year. It makes me do it in chronological order. So it's going to require that 2018 be closed before I can try to close 2019. And that's what it's asking. Do you want to close 1/1 of 2018 through 12/31 of 18? Now, if I needed to add a new or edit the starting dates, I would say no to this and I would edit those dates now. Otherwise, when I say yes, I won't be able to edit those dates. Still be able to post, won't be able to edit these dates in this table. Okay, that's done. I'm going to back out to fiscal year. I'm going to go to close income statement. And I'm going to start filling in these details here. If you've got a saved filter criteria, you can identify that. I think this is only in some of the newer versions of 2017. Closing 12/31/2018. I'm going to pick the journal and the batches that I want to use. And I've created in my general journal a year-end batch. And then it enters my document number for me. And I'm going to post to my retained earnings. I'm also going to click on the dimensions here because I hit my income statement accounts with a dimension. I'm going to go ahead and identify those. I'll say okay. We're going to see NAV coming up with my calculating all of my entries. Step 3 here is going to be going back to the general ledger and the journal itself under the year end. And here are all the entries that it calculates for me. And it makes one final closing entry to retained earnings. I can review these. I can print them off, give it to a manager for final approval, but ultimately all I need to do now is post. And you notice that we've got that C, or the close date there. Everything was posted successfully. Let's go back in there and make sure everything, yep, there it goes. Kind of saw a little blip there. Okay, so everything was closed. Just gonna take a look here. I wanna dive into a couple of details from my chart of accounts. Notice that I can run my GL balance or GL balance by dimension if I wanted to as well. I can identify this to say, do you want to include or exclude closing balances or closing entries? This is going to be important for any analysis that you want to do. If you're closing the year and you notice that there's a residual balance and you want to try to identify that, this is where I start to do some of my analysis of what might be wrong. So if I say include and then I see a balance for an income statement account, I'll know that that's not right. So I'm going to say include. Now, let's make sure that this is view as, I don't want to see net change. I really want to see the balance at date because I want to see everything, including close date, but I'm in the wrong period, so I'm going to do a previous period here. Then I'm going to scroll down. And once I'm in my income statement entries, I can see there are no entries in here. So I'm including those closing entries. That just means that, hey, I've zeroed everything out. So again, if I go here and I'm finding that there is a balance, that means there's something wrong. Maybe somebody accidentally posted something to this year after I ran these processes, or maybe somebody did that same thing for last year's closing dates. I've seen that as well, where somebody posted something in the prior year and you have to run the same process again for the prior year. Okay, so let's go back to our slideshow, and I want to talk about some of the typical year-end support submissions that we see. A lot of them are dimension related, so if you've implemented dimension tracking for a GL account after the first of the year or after the beginning of your fiscal year, then not everything that process will, what NAV's going to do is it's going to process one balancing entry with a blank dimension and then a balancing entry for that income statement account with all the dimension combinations. So if that's not what you're after, and I understand that it wouldn't be, you'd probably want to reclassify those entries to get those entries into the dimensions that they needed to be posted with. There's also a dimension has caused an error, meaning you implemented some dimension combination rules mid-year, and maybe there were some postings that were allowed to get through before that combination rule was applied. So you're going to want to pay attention to that. Also, if your retained earnings account has dimension combination rules being applied to it, you may have to loosen that up just for this year-end submission or year-end calculation, especially if you have in the general ledger setup additional reporting currencies filled in, and NAV will run the close income statement batch job and posts it automatically. This is a typical spot where we see that happening, and it's just because the dimension rules on your retained earnings account are a little bit too strict, so we may have to loosen that up in order for NAV to post to it, and then you can reapply those rules. The posted entries that were made to a closed year, so again, I kind of alluded to that looking at the GL balance by dimension or GL balance, including and excluding that closed date. So again, when you include that closed date and you go to a closed period, a closed year, and you see postings to an income statement, a GL account that is going to run some of your financial statement, it's gonna make it so you can't tie out. And I see a couple of times where this year, for the current year that I'm closing, everything ties, but maybe for 2016 or even 2015, somebody got through and posted something. Also, I see errors or request submissions, support submissions that are related to posting date ranges. So just remember that closing date, that C date that the batch job generates, is the last day of the year that you're closing and the first day of that next year. So it's kind of a fake date. It's midnight or whatever between those 2 days. So make sure that your posting date range is the first day of the next year. Also remember that your general ledger setup date range, so that is usually applicable to the entire organization. I didn't cover this a lot because this is something you probably do on a monthly basis anyway, but your GL setup date range, posting from and to dates, you're going to want that to represent what everybody in the organization should be posting to. And then your user setup is what's going to trump the general ledger setup. So your primary accountants in the organization are going to have a wider date range identified in their user setup. So user setup trumps the general ledger setup. And that is it. So again, let me know if you want me to put my contact information back up. I have this in a checklist form. It's just one page if you want to share it with everybody. If you're a payroll organization, I also have a payroll checklist as well. So I can open this up to questions.
Des, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and put your slide up for your contact info. That way they have it.
You bet.
And everyone, I did go ahead and give you a handout of the checklist that Des was referring to. So you're welcome to click on that and have that for your records. I did put that in the handout section, so the link is there.
Good, thank you.
No questions have come through yet. You did a very good presentation, Des. I liked
Until
it.
somebody can't balance.
Yeah. Well, that happens. It's human error.
Does. No, it does. Well,
okay.
All right. I appreciate everybody's time. Those checklists are definitely very helpful in remembering what to do. So use those. If you have questions, let us know.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for attending the webinar. Thank you, Des, for the presentation. And like I said earlier, it is recorded, so this will be available on our website later this afternoon. And don't forget to check out our past events page for our previous webinars and take a look at those and share them with anyone. Our next webinar, we're actually taking a couple weeks off, will be on December 6th, preparing for year-end payroll reporting, and that is with Innovia Consulting's Lori Knapp. She will be presenting that on December 6th. So thank you again, everyone, for attending. Have a good rest of your week, and happy Thanksgiving to you and your families. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.